that it would be conducting inspections on SFC license holders, the agency began an inspection blitz on these licensed manufacturers and their compliance. Are you prepared if CFIA shows up at your door? Welcome. I am your TAG Talks food safety host, Lisa Lupo. Today I am talking with TAG Executive VP of Regulatory Affairs and TAG Canada Managing Director, Cameron Prince, about this CFIA blitz, along with the recent cuts to the agency. Cam is also a former CFIA VP of Operations. So welcome, Cam.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, and as a former CFIA executive, you have a pretty good handle on the workings of the agency. So in October, the agency began the inspection blitz, planning to inspect more than 2,400 safe food for Canadians licensed manufacturers by October of this year. So can you explain to us what this is all about and why it was initiated?
Well, it's a combination of things, and some might say it was long overdue. The licensing regime and the Safe Food for Canadians regs have been in place now for, oh, getting going on 4 or 5 years now. So it means that a lot of these businesses have been licensed, but many of them have never been inspected, and there's been no verification to check up on them. And this kind of was driven home last year. Well, I should say not last year, 2024, when there was an outbreak of listeria related to a plant-based milk operation in the Greater Toronto area. And unfortunately, those illnesses drew a lot of attention. But of course, the issue that arose out of that was the CFIA inspection. The level of inspection at that facility had been almost non-existent.
Okay.
And the question was, well, how could that happen? This is plant-based milk, almond milk. Um, and you would intuitively you would think there would be some risk associated with that type of product. The agency has been operating on a an algorithm that was a lot of effort went into to develop a risk profile for all facilities, and on that basis, provide frequencies or the amount of inspection effort that would be applied to any particular facility. And unfortunately, that algorithm seems to have been faulty in the sense that it did not identify this type of operation as higher risk,
Okay.
when in fact it definitely is higher risk. And there were a lot of problems at that plant that we won't go into here, but those should have been picked up. And I think there was a great concern across Canada that what is going on here? What can be done about this? And there is a position, a senior position within CFIA called the Inspector General,
Mhm.
and that position is to oversee the efficacy, the consistency, et cetera, the enforcement of CFIA's inspection programs. And the Inspector General did a review following that incident. And there were a number of recommendations that came out of that review. And one of those recommendations was a blitz, essentially what is happening. So the agency agreed with all of the findings of the Inspector General and implemented changes. So that's what brought about this blitz. Now, you have to keep in mind that this is in the manufactured food category. So we're talking about your manufacturing plants that are making anything from biscuits to candies to beverages. So it's a broad range of foods. It does not necessarily cover importers. So that's another grouping that for at some point we may be looking for a blitz in that area. But right now, this is looking at food manufacturers, of which, of course, there are a lot of them, and
Right.
many of them have not been visited for some time. So, just as a regular citizen and looking at this situation, I think this is a very, very good thing. and I would say overdue. And so
Okay.
we're hoping that some stronger food safety outcomes come out of this.
Okay. So, as you kind of mentioned, the initial focus really is on those facilities that have not been previously inspected or not for a long time. So, what should those manufacturers expect when CFIA does arrive at the door?
Well, in some cases, they'll get notification ahead of time. In
Okay.
other cases, they will not. Sometimes an inspection is prompted by an outbreak or an investigation, and CFIA will arrive at your door, and you will not know they're coming. But if this is a regular part of the blitz, you'll get some notification ahead of time. The inspectors sometimes they'll arrive singly. Depends on the size of the operation, the circumstances, but quite often there'll be two and even more, sometimes
Okay.
three inspectors will come. And they will size up the situation, do a quick look, do some questioning, and then they'll kind of focus in on particular areas. And they will do a deep dive in those particular areas. And the main things that they'll be looking for at a higher level coming there in their first look is first of all, is this operation licensed properly? Because um, when the applications were done a number of years ago, they were all done online. So it was really up to the applying plant to outline what products they were manufacturing and what their processes were, etc. Well, we all know the food business changes on almost a daily basis, and many of these plants had dropped lines, had brought in new lines, new products, introduced new allergens, for example, introduced higher risks or lower risk categories. So their whole risk profile that may have been registered with CFIA may have changed.
Okay.
And so it's that means that the job one of the inspectors going in is to make sure that everything is lined up with what is on the license. And if it's not, then the companies have to address that and change that information as quickly as possible. Sometimes plants change ownership, and there was
Mhm.
sometimes new ownership, the new managers come in, and the person who's named as accountable on the file is no longer in the company. So that's another big gap that has to be addressed. So that's where they'll start, and then after that, they'll take a deep dive into the risks associated with the processing.
Okay. Well, one of the requirements also of that licensing, though, is having a preventive control plan or
Yes.
PCP. So, can you talk just a little bit about what the PCP is and what it includes?
Okay, the term preventive control plan is
Hmm.
exactly what it means is that you, as a food manufacturer, you have to analyze your processes, look at all of the hazards in the processes, look at all of the ingredients, look at the final products, and determine what are the hazards associated with all those steps and all those ingredients and all those final products. So you do a hazard analysis and then you develop preventive controls to address those hazards. And that's a fundamental concept throughout the world in terms of food safety and how it works. In the U.S., there's the Food Safety Modernization Act, and they have preventive controls. The fundamentals of all of this is the HACCP program, which is the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, which is the framework that everyone follows.
Hmm.
And it when the Safe Food for Canadians regs were brought in, that was the foundation is that plants were responsible. No longer was it the inspector coming in and checking and making sure that things were in place. It's now the responsibility of that facility to have those preventive measures in place and make sure they're effective.
Okay. And I think similar to what you mentioned about the license, facilities may not always realize that the PCP also is not just like a one and done, but they need to be regularly reviewed and updated. So, what should that review include to ensure those documents are up to date when CFIA arrives?
Well, yeah, and this is a very, very important question. And I think there has been a little bit of a lack of understanding or a lack of diligence among some parts of the food industry in making sure that these preventive controls, they're living things. They change every day. You need to look at what you're doing in your plant, need to adjust your preventive control plan. You need to communicate it. Everybody in the plant needs to understand. Your customers need to understand. And and you have to advise CFIA if there are significant changes. So it's really, really important that there is to, I'll use the term daily care and nurturing of that
Mhm.
preventive control plan is really, really important. And that, of course, requires resources. And I
Right.
think there maybe was a bit of a lack of understanding of the degree of resources that are required to have an effective preventive control plan. So it does mean that somebody has to be available to oversee it. There's a lot of record keeping involved and so on, internal audit to make sure it works, that it's all working properly, uh, activities in the plant to support it, such as swabbing, checking for microbes, final product testing, weight testing, all of those types of testing all support the preventive control plan.
Okay. So what happens if CFIA finds that I'm not compliant with that or any other aspect of the licensing?
Well, that is actually a fairly complex question in the sense
Okay.
that, as you might imagine, there are many, many degrees of noncompliance.
Okay.
So, um, if as an experienced inspector going way back, if I go into a plant, there's always something you can find. No food processing plant is perfect,
Mm.
but and things can be found, but there there are some things that are really quite serious. And many ways of looking at this, like the Global Food Safety Initiative, the BRC, the SQFs, they categorize noncompliance as major, minor, critical. Um, so that's one lens to look at it is what is it? CFIA doesn't specifically use that, but at the same time, they will look at what's happening. And first thing they're going to look at is, are there food safety hazards? So uh, if there are critical control points in the operation, are they being monitored properly? Because if they're not, there's a risk that there's going to be a food safety hazard.
Right.
Are there is their testing program acceptable? Do they check the environment within the plant for microorganisms such as Listeria or Salmonella or E. coli? That's called an environmental monitoring program. That's essential in a food plant. And do they have that? And is it operating effectively? Um, so to answer the question, what will CFIA do? If they find something, they will write it up and provide it to you in a written form.
Okay.
Um, they will then usually require corrective action, and that corrective action will have to be submitted back to CFIA within a certain time period. Um, and the inspector will come back and check that that's been done. Now, if it doesn't get done, then there is an enforcement policy which escalates all the way to the point of suspension or cancellation of the
Mm.
license. And CFIA is increasingly rigorous in this regard. So every one of these non-compliances are on record and they count as a mark against your record.
Okay.
And so these tally up over the course of 5 years. So it's kind of like your driving license. You lose points, then maybe 3 years from now, then you get those points come back to you. Same thing with this CFIA system. So if you get to the point where you're having one, two, three of these per year, then you're going to see escalated enforcement by CFIA. You're going to see warning letters, and you may see suspension of the license. That happens fairly often.
Oh,
And
okay.
once you have your license suspended, it's usually a period of time. I've seen anywhere to several months to as low as a few weeks to get a license back, but it doesn't happen fast.
Okay.
And so you can lose your license to operate, and then you're out of business. So
Right.
it's pretty significant. That's worse than any fine or anything else. There
Yeah.
are also in the enforcement policy, there are fines. There are other provisions that CFIA that can exercise if they wish to. When I say fines, they're called administrative monetary penalties. So
Okay.
it's kind of like a speeding ticket kind of concept. So yeah,
Okay.
so I may not have answered your question very directly, Lisa, but
Oh,
the point is there's a lot of different things that could happen, and basically none of them are very good.
right. And if
Yeah.
CFIA says take care of this, you better take care
Yeah.
of this.
You have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I th we see this a lot, and maybe I'm diverging a little bit here, but um, try to, if this happens to you, be objective and calm as you possibly can, and address it.
Okay.
Address the concerns. Don't say, "Oh, CFI doesn't know what they're doing. They're wrong." Even if they are wrong, you still got to fix the problem. And
Right.
usually they're not wrong. So it's not worth the old expression, you can't fight City Hall. Sometimes that applies in this situation. You've got to address these things.
Okay. So I'm going to change the topic here just a little bit because we've also recently learned that CFIA is making some really significant personnel cuts. So
Yeah.
do you see that as impacting this Blitz initiative, or how else might it impact the industry?
Well, the simple answer to your question, will it affect the Blitz? The answer is no.
Okay.
Uh, and the reason for that is that CFIA has indicated that they are going to cut, I think the number is 587 positions over the next few years. Now, the agency is about 6,000 plus, so it's roughly 10%.
Yeah.
It's not small. And you got to keep in mind that CFIA did not get additional resources when the new licensing regulations came in, which brought in a ton of work to CFIA, and they were not correspondingly resourced at the time.
Right. Okay.
So, in recognition of that, just going back to the announced cuts, in addition to these 587, there are over 1,100 positions that are affected. And what that means is that not necessarily that they're going to be cut or gotten rid of, but they're going to be changed. So
Okay.
essentially, what they're doing is creating a pool of resources that can be reallocated. And they have made a commitment to reallocate up to 300 positions to the front line in food inspection. So that means that there are resources for this blitz. And they have made, the minister, the president of CFIA have made public commitments to deliver on this. So there'll be no backing off on that no matter what. And they have made, in their decision making on reductions, they've made allowances for that. So I can't. Now, will there be other impacts on other things that CFIA does? Yes, inevitably there will be. But on this particular manufactured food blitz, no.
Okay. So given all that's going on with CFIA,
Yeah.
how does Tag Canada assist food businesses?
Well, we can help a lot. And I don't want to be oversell it or be immodest, but we are in a very good position to help because we have, beyond myself, we have a number of other individuals who previously worked at CFIA in various mostly in senior positions. We understand how it works. We
Okay.
understand how to work with CFIA, how to get things done, how to get your company through what can be a very challenging time. We can provide, coach you through it, which is sometimes very important because it can be very traumatic for some companies.
Mm.
And we've been quite successful in helping companies take the right corrective actions, present them in a form that CFIA will accept, and avoid those unfortunate situations where licenses are suspended or they're not reinstated or they're canceled. So whenever you get into this situation, if you feel that you need some help, please call us. We can definitely help you out in this situation. Yeah, so uh,
Okay.
it's something that we're really good at, and we like
Okay.
helping companies wherever we can, and it benefits everybody. CFIA is very wants that kind of wants to see these companies get corrected. So they're happy to see whatever resources can be brought in to address it. They're happy with. Yeah.
Okay. So I really want to thank you, Cam, for all your insights on CFIA. But if you think about everything we've discussed here, what would you see as really the key points that you would like our audience to take away?
Well, I think to recognize that we are really in a different era when it comes to, and yes, there's been a lot of discussion, there's been a lot of change, the regulations came into place, um, but really it's starting to hit home
Okay.
that they in a lot of sectors that were relatively untouched by CFIA, all of a sudden inspectors are there and enforcing the law. Now, areas like meat and fish and dairy have seen inspectors on a regular basis, particular meat. So this is not really new to them.
Hmm.
But if you're a cookie manufacturer, you probably haven't seen CFIA for a number of years. So it's all of a sudden they come in, they find a bunch of problems, there's a big issue. So it's a new world for a
Okay.
huge chunk of the food industry. And if you haven't experienced this, it can be intimidating or difficult. So that's the big message that I would have for the food industry in Canada. If you're in that grouping that hasn't been inspected very much, then yeah, be ready.
Okay.
It's gonna touch you for sure.
And it's nice that the TAG does have so many CFIA folks that know exactly what they'll be coming in looking for and doing,
Yeah,
and that helps
yeah,
too. So,
yeah, exactly.
okay.
Well,
Thanks again, Cam.
thank
And
you,
I want
Lisa.
Okay, and I'd also like to thank our audience for listening in. We hope that we've provided some valuable insights on the CFIA's blitz and current actions and how to get help. And we really appreciate your joining us. So, as always, to stay informed on all things food safety and ensure that you don't miss any episodes, like, follow, or subscribe to Tag Talks Food Safety on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or whatever happens to be your favorite podcast. Thanks again.
Thank you.